I'm sorry. This followed me home.
Oh, what's this?
Nobody called it in.
A coincidence is a conspiracy of the guilty.
Let's find out.
The Lioness, Season 3, Episode 3 trailer has arrived, and the question it raises is the one that changes the entire shape of this season. If there is an infiltrator inside the operation, how long have they been there, and how much do they already know? Episode 2 ended with Joe McNamara's suspicions aimed directly at the Ukrainian double agent who handed over Aleksi Yurimov's location on a flash drive at Georgetown University, and Episode 3 is the moment those suspicions stop being a theory and become an active crisis. Is the breach something that happened recently, or has someone been feeding information to Russian intelligence for months, possibly for long enough to have shaped the Yurimov mission itself from the very beginning? Is the captive woman in the season trailer, the one who tells Joe that she knows what Joe does and calls her the Lioness, the same person Cruz and Tex were sent to abduct from the bar at the end of Episode 2? Did Byron Westfield's restaurant confrontation with a Russian adversary accomplish anything beyond confirming that the enemy already knows exactly who he is? Could the man the Lioness team captured in those Donetsk tunnels actually be an impostor rather than the real Aleksi Yurimov? And if that theory is correct, does it mean the entire Ukraine operation was a setup from the start? And with the dual timeline closing the gap between the 6 months earlier story and the present-day kidnapping, what happens in Episode 3 that brings Joe one step closer to the Virginia street where her captors are waiting? Every one of those questions has an answer, and this breakdown covers all of them. The single most important revelation from Episode 2 is not the tracker being cut from Joe's left big toe, and it is not the team breaching the suburban house only to find her already gone, with nothing but blood on the floor and the locator left behind. The most important moment in No Sorrow Like the Survivor is the debrief. Joe sits across from Kaitlyn Meade, Byron Westfield, and Secretary of State Edwin Mullins, and lays out the theory that has been building since the first frames of the season. She tells them that the answer with the fewest variables is the Ukrainian double agent, the woman who approached Kyle McManus at a bar, led Joe to Georgetown, and handed over Yurimov's location as part of an arrangement that Ukraine framed as mutual benefit. The evidence from that debrief strongly suggests that Joe has been thinking about this since the moment the two fake state police showed up at her door. She then goes one devastating step further. She suggests that the man they dragged out of those Donetsk tunnels may not be Aleksi Yurimov at all. The evidence from the Ukraine operation points to a mission that unfolded exactly as someone planned, from the initial approach at the bar, to the drone strikes that obscured the extraction, to the impossibly clean intelligence about Yurimov's tunnel position. However, unfortunately, the most chilling implication of Joe's theory is that the Lioness team may have spent weeks believing they captured Putin's hammer, while actually holding a Russian decoy, a man trained to survive interrogation long enough for the real damage to be done elsewhere. The team's discovery of the abandoned tracker in that suburban house is the episode's cruelest single image, not because of what it shows, but because of what it confirms. They were fast enough, capable enough, and coordinated enough to find the house. They were still too late. The gap between arriving and finding the tracker already cut and lying in a pool of blood on the floor is not a tactical failure. It is a signal that the enemy is faster, better informed, and operating on a timeline the CIA has not yet mapped. That signal is what drives the breach confrontation in Episode 3, because Joe cannot afford to keep reacting to information the enemy already has. The trailer for Episode 3 is positioned directly in the aftermath of that debrief, and the logline confirms it. Joe confronts a breach, driving the team into a risky play to root out infiltrators. That risky play is almost certainly the operation to extract the Ukrainian agent. The scene that every fan is going to be re-watching from the Episode 3 trailer is the interrogation. At the end of Episode 2, Joe's suspicions had put the Ukrainian operative directly in the CIA's crosshairs. Cruz, Manuelos, and Tex were dispatched alongside Kyle McManus to abduct her from a bar. The season trailer, released before the season began, shows Joe and Kyle bringing a woman into a room, tying her to a chair, and demanding answers. the woman does not break immediately. She tells Joe and her team that they know what Joe does, and she calls Joe the Lioness. That word lands like a grenade. The Lioness program is one of the most classified operations in the United States intelligence community, a program so restricted that most of the government does not know it exists. The fact that a foreign operative, sitting in a chair with her hands bound, can look at the CIA's station chief and correctly identify not just her role, but the program's name, means the breach is not shallow. It is not a personnel file leak or a blown cover story from a single mission. The evidence from that trailer exchange points toward a penetration that reaches deep into the institutional knowledge of the CIA itself, and Episode 3 appears to be the episode where Joe begins to understand exactly how deep the damage goes. The most likely explanation for how the breach happened connects directly to what Byron Westfield discovered in his restaurant confrontation in Episode 2. The scene was described by critics as razor-sharp, beginning as strangely playful banter before hardening into a sequence of icy, calculated threats. Byron was face-to-face with a powerful foreign adversary linked directly to the recent security breaches, and the adversary showed no fear. The evidence from that encounter tells the audience something significant about the timeline of the breach. A Russian intelligence asset, confident enough to sit across from the CIA's deputy director in a public restaurant and deliver threats, is not an asset who believes the operation is in its early stages. The evidence strongly suggests that from the adversary's perspective, the operation is not beginning in Episode 3. It is concluding. Whatever penetration Russian intelligence achieved inside the Lioness program was complete long before Joe killed those two men on her doorstep, which means every piece of intelligence the CIA has acted on, every decision made in the months leading up to the Ukraine mission, has been made in an environment that was already compromised. However, unfortunately, the most operationally devastating consequence of that timeline is what it means for the Yurimov asset currently in CIA custody. If the breach predates the Georgetown meeting, the man in that cell was placed there deliberately. Every interrogation the CIA has conducted, every question answered, every piece of intelligence that has come out of that cell represents exactly what Russia wanted the CIA to believe, a curated picture designed to shape American intelligence decisions for months or years ahead. The most logical conclusion is that Episode 3 is where the CIA stops treating the breach as a counterintelligence problem to be contained and starts treating it as an active deception operation still running. But the theory that rewrites the entire season is the Yurimov impostor question, and the evidence is more compelling than most fans have yet acknowledged. Consider the specific conditions of the Ukraine extraction. The Lioness team fought through a hellscape of trenches and drone strikes and North Korean combatants to reach a specific tunnel at a specific time with specific intelligence about where Yurimov would be. They found him. They cut a tracker from his arm. They extracted him under fire. Every single step of that operation required intelligence that could only come from someone who knew Yurimov's exact movements, intelligence that the Ukrainian double agent provided. However, unfortunately, intelligence that precise is also intelligence that can be precisely controlled. If Russia knew the Lioness team was coming for Yurimov, they had two options: move him or replace him. Moving him would have raised suspicion. Replacing him with a trained operative capable of surviving the initial capture and performing as Yurimov through early interrogation would have allowed the real Yurimov to remain operational while the CIA believed it had neutralized the threat. The evidence from Joe's own suspicion in the Episode 2 debrief suggests she has already mapped exactly this scenario, and the woman currently in CIA custody may have provided the confirmation that sent Cruz and Tex to that bar. Episode 3's breach storyline becomes infinitely more dangerous if the man in CIA custody is not who the agency believes he is, because every interrogation technique, every piece of intelligence extracted from him, every assumption made based on his capture has been feeding Russia exactly the information they wanted the CIA to have. While the breach storyline and the Yurimov impostor theory dominate the Episode 3 setup, there is another thread quietly unfolding in the background of this episode that every fan needs to watch closely. and it belongs to Errol Meade. The season trailer includes a voiceover from Kaitlyn's husband, in which he tells her that their enemy's objective is for the United States to be at war with itself. Kaitlyn responds that the enemy certainly has enough agents in the country. That exchange does not sound like casual dinner conversation. Errol Meade has always been positioned as a figure adjacent to the intelligence world, close enough to Kaitlyn's work to understand its language, but operating outside the program's official boundaries. The evidence from the trailer suggests that Errol's observation about a domestic war is not speculation, but something with an intelligence foundation, which raises the question of what Errol knows and how he knows it. However, unfortunately, the most unsettling possibility raised by that voiceover is not that Russia has agents in the United States. The CIA already knew that from the fake state police who used Romanian passports at Joe's door, and from the surveillance spotters identified in Episode 2 as Russian SVR. The most unsettling possibility is that Errol's framing, not war against the CIA, not war against the Lioness program, but war against the country itself, suggests the breach serves a purpose larger than capturing Joe or dismantling one covert program. The evidence from the season's overarching synopsis, which describes patterns appearing where they should not, and names vanishing and paths rearranging, points toward Episode 3 beginning to reveal the shape of that larger purpose for the first time. The secondary character whose Episode 3 arc carries the most weight for the season's emotional core is Neil McNamara. Episode 2 ended with Joe collapsing into Neil's arms and saying she was sorry. No tactics, no deflection, no CIA officer's composure. Just a woman who has spent her entire career controlling every situation she is placed in, standing in her own home and having nothing to offer except an apology. The Episode 4 logline, which confirms that a frantic hunt is launched while at home, Neil struggles with growing fears, makes clear that his crisis does not resolve in Episode 3. Dave Annable has built Neil across 3 seasons as a man who loves his wife completely and understands her work abstractly, and Episode 2 forced the distance between those two truths to collapse entirely. The scene where Joe says she is sorry and falls apart in his arms is the most quietly devastating moment of the season so far, the first time in 3 seasons that Joe McNamara has had nothing to offer except the acknowledgement that she has run out of ways to protect the people she loves. Neil held her. He did not ask questions in that moment. But Episode 3 is the morning after, and the evidence from the Episode 4 logline suggests that Neil's fears are growing, not settling. The evidence strongly suggests that what Neil discovers or suspects in this stretch of episodes will become the personal thread running underneath all the operational intensity. However, unfortunately, the most painful irony of Neil's position is that the same qualities that make him the right partner for Joe, his steadiness, his patience, his refusal to be frightened away, are the qualities that make him most vulnerable in a situation where the enemy has already demonstrated they know where he lives and what he loves. Episode 3's breach storyline does not stay inside the CIA. It reaches into the McNamara household, and Neil's growing fears are not irrational. They are accurate. The season trailer also establishes a thread that Episode 3 appears positioned to develop further: the domestic infiltration network. The footage shows Cruz and what appears to be Josephina examining a Virginia driver's license belonging to a man named Cade McWeaver, suggesting that at least one of the infiltrators the Episode 3 logline references is not a foreign national operating on a diplomatic cover, but an American asset recruited by Russian intelligence. The evidence from the season trailer also shows Cruz and Josephina in what appears to be a honey trap operation targeting McWeaver specifically, which means by Episode 3, the team has already developed enough intelligence on the domestic network to identify individual nodes and move against them. If that is confirmed in Episode 3, the breach immediately becomes a counterintelligence problem of a completely different magnitude. The CIA can identify and expel foreign intelligence officers relatively cleanly. It is a procedural disruption, not an existential one. However, unfortunately, a network of recruited American citizens operating as covert handlers for Russian intelligence is a penetration that cannot be resolved through standard counter-espionage channels. because every cleared personnel file, every background check, every trusted colleague becomes a potential node in a network the CIA does not yet fully understand. The evidence from Episode 4's logline, which describes the team exposing a hidden network operating through covert handlers, confirms that what Episode 3 begins is not finished in a single hour. The risky play Joe drives her team into in Episode 3 is the opening move in a multi-episode operation that will define the entire back half of the season, and the infiltrators they root out in this episode are almost certainly not the last ones they will find. What the show appears to be building toward through Episodes 3 and 4 is a revelation that the domestic network has been active long enough to have shaped decisions that predate the current crisis, decisions that may go back further than anyone in the debrief room wants to acknowledge. After everything Episode 2 set up, and everything Episode 3 promises to deliver, the one question every fan is focused on is the simplest. When does this actually drop? Lioness Season 3 Episode 3, titled around the official logline of confronting a breach, premieres exclusively on Paramount Plus on Sunday, August 16, 2026, at 3 a.m. Eastern Time sharp. The season runs 8 total episodes, matching the episode counts of both previous seasons exactly, with the finale scheduled for September 20th, 2026. That schedule means fans are now squarely in the middle of the season's turn. Episode 3 is the episode where the show typically shifts from establishing the crisis to accelerating hard toward its resolution. Based on the trajectory from the premiere through Episode 2, and based on everything the Episode 3 logline and the season trailer have revealed, the acceleration in this episode is going to be significant and irreversible. The pattern the season has established: premiere delivers the action, Episode 2 delivers the emotional fallout, Episode 3 delivers the operational pivot that the rest of the season builds on, suggests that whatever Joe discovers about the breach in this episode will not be the end of the crisis. It will be the moment she understands the crisis is bigger than she thought, and the rest of the season will be her response to that understanding. Now, the conversation moves to the fans. 3 questions are now raging across every platform and need answering before August 16th arrives. If the woman Cruz and Tex abducted from the bar confirms that the man in CIA custody is not the real Yurimov, what does the CIA do with that information? Does it become a card to play against Russia, or a wound too embarrassing to acknowledge? Is Errol Meade's knowledge of Russia's active domestic operation something he obtained through official channels, or is there a version of this story where a character that close to Kaitlyn has been quietly feeding intelligence in a direction no one has yet considered? And the question that the breach storyline makes most urgent and most personal of all, when Joe roots out the infiltrators in Episode 3 and discovers exactly how far inside the operation the penetration actually reaches, will there be anyone left in the entire chain of command she fully trusts? Or does this episode end with Joe McNamara completely alone inside the war she is fighting? The video on screen covers everything else fans absolutely need to know before Episode 3 drops.